You are unmuted.
Okay, we'll
now.
go ahead and get started now. Tracy, we'll go ahead and get started now. We're kind of continuing from last week. There was a series of things that we discussed that we didn't get time to get on all of the topics. We're calling them vignettes. And the vignettes are short, very brief, to the point aspects of the esoteric wisdom teachings. Esoteric means secret, hidden, and known only to a few. Exoteric means things that the mass of humanity generally understands, common sense things. In between exoteric and esoteric is what we call mesoteric. Things like calculus or sending rockets to the moon. I don't know anything about it, and very few people do, but it's known that it exists. And so that puts it in the realm of knowing. Again, esoteric is the definition, and it coincides with the word occult, which is grossly misunderstood. Occult and esoteric mean the exact same thing. In the 19th century, when our theosophical fathers and founders, including, of course, our beloved Madame Blavatsky, they had to use the language of the day. And the language of the day was primarily is a time when the term occult was used, which means esoteric, secret, hidden, and known only to a few. It unfortunately has digressed into meaning something evil or satanic, which is not true. And that we need to clarify that. So that's our first vignette for the evening. Last week, we talked about the Christ's return, and we talked about the nomenclature of esoteric anatomy. We showed the chakra system. We talked a little bit about the Maha Chohan, who is the spiritual leader of the hierarchy of our system. And we said that one of his great concerns, as I've been told and advised by my teachers, is the problem of animal abuse. And one of the great concerns is the trafficking, sex trafficking of children, but sex trafficking in general, but certainly the abuse of the children. It only goes to really to make sense that if you're concerned about the animals, you're concerned about the human beings as well, especially the children. We talked about issues that I have and others who I know with the Dalai Lama, and I think it might have upset one of our attendees who couldn't comprehend or assimilate what I was talking about. We said that the deep truth concerning the Dalai Lama is that only 1 in 10 is a true Dalai Lama. They have a system for picking them. And as our government is corrupt, some believe that the system of the Tibetan monks is flawed as well. The child is supposed to be chosen, supposed to be able to pick out 14 objects from a previous life. It all sounds really good, but it's really debatable in most cases. And that comes from comments made by an old-time theosophist who himself was an initiate by the name of Christmas Humphreys. Some of you will know the name of Christmas Humphreys. And when he was asked about the Dalai Lama, he said that the deep truth is that only 1 in 10 is a true Dalai Lama. The thing that's been amazing to me, I've heard him speak in person, and he's just not esoteric. He sounds almost idiotic in a lot of the things he says. Not everything. Don't get that idea. But he is a strange character. And anyway, some people took offense to that. And that's okay. I have broad shoulders and can withstand the derision. And what we wanted to do tonight, we were talking about, we had 15 points for the Christ's return. It was in a magazine that we published in England. It was a group of esoteric students and disciples. And it was in this issue, which really was the first issue of Inscape magazine. And the problem that we have, so many of us, is that, as we used to say a long time ago in England, is that we've suffered a Christian upbringing. And when you live in America, where life is relatively easy, in that it is the land of plenty, and you've been raised a Christian, as I was, you tend to have not a good criteria for understanding and identifying the Christ. How do you formulate your ideas? And of course, I've been around for a long time, and I meet a lot of these guys at these New Age festivals, and they promote this idea of Jesus returning. And they themselves have long hair and beards, and talk in fanciful ways about the Christ. I'm not a guy who quotes the Bible or the New Testament, but I can tell you this, that one of the most powerful statements concerning the Christ is that he will come like a thief in the night. We talked about it last week. That means that you won't know when he's here. He has to be incognito in the world just to protect him, because there are millions of people who would try to kill him. That should make sense and not really require any further explanation. But I think we got as far last week as we got to Rule 8, or the 8th criteria. So we need to go to 9. He has appeared widely on radio, television, as Alice Bailey said he would. 10, his miracles are in his works, where they should be. That's where his miracles are, is in his work. And they have grown prodigiously for those who care to examine them patiently. Alfred Lord 11. Alfred Lord Tennyson, noted for his seership, forecast accurately the birthday of the Christ. In a symbolic way, so did Rudolf Steiner. Not verbally, but through Steiner's actions and a certain portion of his life's work. 12, it is said that avatars are born when a great temple is burnt to the ground. At the hour of his birth, the most famous in the esoteric world was thus consumed. 13, he is known esoterically to his closest friends who support his work against concerted attacks. 14, he is anxious to avoid emotion and sensationalism, and therefore maintains, for the time being, a low profile, traveling incognito. These observations are put out collectively by his friends, most of whom who have been for many, many years. They are located around the world and administer for him. I have another 36 points of a criterion for the Christ, and we may talk about those next week. This was just the 15 that we originally published in Inscape magazine. We can have questions on it later. What I wanted, another one of the vignettes for tonight, was the true authorship of the Shakespearean plays and sonnets, which has been a great debate for students in academia and even among the esoteric. There is a lot of conjecture about who the true author was. My friend and my teacher, Douglas Baker, one of the most prolific, if not the most prolific authors of esoteric books in the 20th and thus far the 21st century, wrote a book about it to solve the issue and to answer the questions. And he was able to enter into the Akashic record. Edgar Casey often talked about the Akashic record. This isn't something new. The great initiates and disciples of the world and people who were being overshadowed like Casey were giving out these teachings that were extracted from the Akashic record. The Akashic record exists in the outer reaches of the astral body of the earth. And if you can project to that region of the astral body of the earth, you can make contact with the Akashic records. I've told here in this very room and in other places, the Theosophical Society in Detroit, Olivet College and the summer school program, elsewhere in America, my experiences in the Akashic record, where I was able to travel back 80,000 years to the truncated pyramid, the Great Pyramid, which is not truncated any longer, but 80,000 years ago it was, and the surface was flat. It was constructed at a height of about 50 stones. And it was used as an astronomical observatory, and carved on the surface of that observatory at the height of 50 stones were astrological glyphs that were used in planets that were used by the ancient Atlanteans, who really were the ones who constructed the pyramid, not the Egyptians. It'll be discovered eventually by a military type of advanced X-ray or infrared photography that will be able to fly above the pyramid in the bird's eye view and photograph through the stones and prove what I'm telling you tonight. The Grand Gallery was actually a telescope. I saw them using it, and they were able, through this what they call the Grand Gallery. No scientist or archaeologist has an explanation for the Grand Gallery. But the Grand Gallery was a series of lenses that were moved up and down, and it was so dark inside the pyramid. They say the darkest place in the world on the surface of the earth is in the pyramid, the Great Pyramid of Egypt. I believe it, because what was happening in my experience was all of the light was being absorbed. That you could see out through the blue sky. I was able to see out through it into the night sky. and read the stars and the heavens and the planets. So it's an important thing to understand about the Akashic record. When we're able to project to it, I did it in full conscious mediumship, sitting on that sofa out there in the family room where the TV is. And sometimes we do it consciously, and sometimes we don't do it consciously. We do it in a dream state or while we're asleep, and we can astrally project to anywhere within the orbit of our consciousness. It depends on exactly that. The extent of your consciousness will determine how far you can project. Anyway, Baker did this with the study, and he has an incredibly inquisitive mind, to determine once and for all the mystery of the true authorship of the Shakespearean plays. What is interesting about it, in my conversations too with him, was that I had a life right there at Stratford on Avon 500 years ago when William Shakespeare was alive. This is what we know from the esoteric point of view and in the Akashic records. There are 6 known examples of William Shakespeare's handwriting. It is obvious, even to intelligent people, but in casual observation, that he couldn't spell his own name. Some of the signatures show or indicate that his hand was guided by somebody else, like on his will to his daughter, where he left certain important objects to his daughter with no mention of the writings. But there are six known examples. Hard to believe that an author so great as the supposed William Shakespeare couldn't write or spell his own name, but it's true. What is also true is that Will Shakespeare was, you should gather from what I just told you, he was illiterate. He had almost no education. He was a poacher of deer. He was a womanizer who got Anne Hathaway pregnant and then decided he was going to marry another woman 5 miles down the road. It was a man who was a friend of the Hathaway family by the name of John Richardson, who was the true author of the Shakespearean plays and sonnets. And through the investigation that was done, this is proven. It's proven by virtue of the fact that there are 3 great mysteries that were resolved in the writing of the book. One of the mysteries, well, I'll just say all 3 of the mysteries. The 3 mysteries are, who is the true author? And you get all these New Age people and academics who think that it was Francis Bacon or somebody else around that time. Is absolutely not true. It was initiate writing. The plays and sonnets were initiately conceived, if there is such a word, I think there might be, by John Richardson, who was in fact in the Manichaea. And his job was to popularize the dialect of Kent, knowing that in 500 years into the future, that the English language, which he and Chaucer were helping to perfect, would become the world language which it has. Tonight, as we speak, there are probably 200 million Chinese people learning to speak English. That's a big number. And then you take India, which is as big as China, and there's another hundreds of millions trying to learn and speak English in India. So it really is the world language. And the idea behind the language, as incredible as this will sound to some, is that we needed an elastic language for the world to use in the Aquarian age. It's not French. It's not Spanish, although some people will think it is, but it isn't. It had to be a language that was versatile and elastic, and it evolved from the work primarily of John Richardson, and with the help also of Chaucer. The language was being developed and perfected. And there was another big reason behind it. And one of the reasons was that they knew 500 years ago that the externalization of a new astrology would come into the world. And that astrology would require a language, English, that was elastic and could be used to explain the complexities, even things like the colloquialisms of a language that can be identified in astrology, in esoteric astrology, which we no longer really call it esoteric astrology, we call it the new astrology. So in this work on the Shakespearean plays, I'm telling you this because to me, it's fascinating and it's really interesting. And I know it's true because I had a life at that time in Stratford area and had contact with many of the people that make up the whole Shakespearean history of that time. So the three significant things were the true authorship, who is W.H., and who was the Dark Lady. And nobody, all the smartest guys on the planet, they just guess at stuff. They think maybe W.H. was some woman that he had a liking for, and that the Dark Lady was some woman of Middle Eastern or Northern African descent. Not true. W.H. was William Hart. He was a young boy who was extremely feminine and had a unique beauty about him. Although John Richardson wasn't a homosexual thing, but it was a love for the boy who had a very mild nature. His family were hat makers in that part of England. And John Richardson, the true author of the Shakespearean plays, who you can discover, you can find the historical records that John Richardson existed. He was one of the very first guys to be a part of a postal system in the world, in England, where there was an established postal system. He worked pretty much as a yeoman type guy. He contracted out to haul furniture, horse-drawn wagons. Will Shakespeare, as I said, was just a illiterate oaf, and his involvement with Shakespeare, with John Richardson, was that Richardson would write the plays. Theater was just developing in England. And Shakespeare would take the plays down to the theaters, Globe Theater, other theaters that were just being built and established. And then he would come back to John Richardson and tell him what they thought of the play and what they liked and what they didn't like. The only play that Shakespeare wrote or had anything to do with it, it was his input, somebody else wrote it because he couldn't spell, was The Merry Wives of Windsor. And even the academics agree that The Merry Wives of Windsor pales horribly in comparison to the other Shakespeare works and sonnets. But that was the only one that can honestly and truthfully be credited to Will Shakespeare. So William Hart was the recipient of these sonnets that were written to W.H., a boy who was about 13 or 14 years old. There was no homosexual liaison between the two men. His family were friends of Richardson. Richardson had many friends in that part of England, among Hathaways among them. The third important key was that the ode to the Dark Lady, which I have a whole PowerPoint presentation, which I'll probably give in January on this subject. It'll be about 45 minutes or an hour long. But the Dark Lady that he wrote this ode to was actually a horse. It was a mare of a beautiful stature. And if you read the sonnet to the horse, he says things like, her breath stank. Her breasts were the color of dung. Her hair was like wire. So he's describing this horse with foul-smelling breath and not a very flattering series of things to say about a beautiful woman of court, when in fact he gave a clue in his other writings that he once writ a poem to a horse. It's in one of his other sonnets where he gives the clue away. Interesting stuff to think about. You can debate it for hours. I know that my experiences in the Akashic record are undeniable truths. When you experience it, there's no denying it. And that's the way this book was conceived, was through investigations into the Akashic record. One of the things that the Theosophical Society has always pushed is the idea of doing research. I've never met hardly anybody that I ever thought was doing any research, trying to explain the things like we discover in the Akashic record. Yeah, they'll argue the point, oh yeah, there's science, theosophical scientists. It's not what I'm talking about. The Akashic record is a great resource for research. And I'm surprised that there aren't more people who use it and who also condemn those who do.
Exciting.
So, thoughts on Shakespeare. One of my friends asked a question today on Facebook about what people are calling downloads. It's an important topic. And what is being implied by the idea of downloads is getting information. Information like I just gave out through the Akashic records, through overshadowing, when higher beings overshadow you and they use your brain and your throat chakra and they give out teachings. It's a real thing. I know it is. I've experienced it a few times. It's not a regular thing. I've known people who it was a regular occurrence for them. Extraordinary people, I must say. But one of the questions that came out of the idea of spiritual downloads is this lady asked, we need to know why this is happening and how we should respond. It seems personal, but is it? Great question. What a fabulous question. Yeah, it's real and it does seem personal, but the people who are receiving these downloads, whether they know it or not, are a part of a group that is connected around the planet. You may not actively be aware. Certainly that was the truth in the past, but in the future, you will be aware that you're a part of a group and that you're receiving downloads. And people are beginning to get them. There's a number of reasons for that. And one of the reasons is that the veils between the physical and etheric worlds are thinning. And people are sensitive, not everybody, but certain people are sensitive to this thinning of the veils. Very important issue. One of the things that came to mind today, kind of as a download for me, was an article that was, of all things, in the Washington Post about an alien comet that came in from beyond our solar system. Scientists generally agree that there are only two known objects that have ever come in from outside our solar system. I don't know how true that is, but that was what they said in the article in the Washington Post. We'll assume it's true. What was the other object? The other object was a cigar-shaped rock. We talked about it. It was Ron. Ron brought it up when we first identified it. It's a cigar-shaped rock that is spinning through our solar system. They've given it the name of Oumuamua, which is a Hawaiian name. I butchered the pronunciation, I'm sure, but it means the Hawaiian meaning of that name is the messenger from afar. And the thing that's interesting about it is that even science, there's a group that's called wrote it down here, the New Electric Universe Theory Forum. The New Electric Universe Theory Forum is a group of scientists who are right on the edge of the occult. They're right on the edge of the esoteric. They're beginning to bridge the mundane science of astronomy with new theories and ideas, which we should expect as we're leaving the Piscean age and entering into the age of Aquarius. And their theory is, as we know, most of us know, is that there's more to these objects than being products of ice, metal, cosmic dust, rocks, and gases. This group of scientists believe that they're bringing in some sort of an energy into our solar system, which I concur. And that energy is called the seven rays. And we have a chart here. Can you make sure, Julia, that we can see this adequately? But this is the way the rays work. We say that we live in a septenary solar system and that there are seven energies that emanate through our solar system. We've talked about the rays many times. It is the foundation of esoteric psychology, and that these energies are extra systemic. They come from beyond our solar system. I told some guys a couple of years ago, a very esoteric group that are on Facebook. He said, well, what do these comets do? And I said, well, they bring in ray energies. The rays are changing, and these meteorites or comets are bringing in this new ray energy into our planet. And they're extra systemic. They come from beyond our solar system into our galaxy, into our solar system, and into us through these astrological, through the zodiacal signs and planets. And that's a simple explanation for it. One of the interesting things that both Steiner and the Rosicrucians talked about, I think maybe Alice Bailey did too, is the idea that these meteorites, these incredible objects, also take out maybe the old rays, like the sixth ray is rapidly dying out. The fourth ray is rapidly coming in. It was Bailey who said that 90 years ago that the blue flowers would begin to die off across the planet as the fourth ray began to establish itself on Earth and its effects being felt. So it's a very important thing to remember and to be relevant about is the rays, also the psychology of the rays. And we talked about how your soul is on one of the seven rays, your mental body is on one, and we do a ray analysis where we can identify your astral body, the ray type of your astral body. We can identify your personality type, your physical body. We even have pictures of the ray types of bodies, which we'll give out in future lectures, probably maybe as early as next month, but certainly when the winter season or winter program starts. So those are some of the things that we wanted to highlight in our esoteric vignettes for tonight. Randy, you got a question?
Can you read the little blurbs starting from the top?
Yeah, this is the infinite. The great bear, the seven head centers in the body of the one about whom naught may be said.
Okay, next one.
The next one is the solar system. This is our solar system here. These are the Pleiades, or the seven sisters. They are the throat center in the one about whom naught may be said. They're talking about God at a very high level.
Mm-hmm.
Down here, Randy, it says the seven sacred planets or seven spirits before the throne, as they're called in the Bible. Seven spirits. But it's proof of the septenary nature of the solar system in which we live. When the masters were asked about this septenary nature, if these rays were prevalent throughout the solar system, they said, yes, they believed from what they knew. We're talking about 5th degree initiates or maybe some higher, 6th, 7th degree, that yes, that is a universal law.
And that last one?
The system of man with his seven centers or chakras. Okay. So these are the seven chakras here. They're not real well delineated, but the seven rays also affect the seven chakras. So it's a vast science, and when psychology becomes an exact science, then what they will teach will be esoteric psychology as we're teaching it now through the use of the rays. And Alice Bailey wrote about it, and Baker also Blavatsky alluded to it. She inferred the rays, but it wasn't hers to give out. Bailey gave out an outpouring of the rays, but an incomplete understanding where Baker more clearly identified the ray types. That's an important point too to bring up, because the occult prophecy said that the wisdom teachings would be given out in three great outpourings. The theosophists think that that's all there is what basic fundamental theosophy is. But theosophy, as it's taught and practiced, is just the first outpouring. It took place between 1875 and 1925, 50-year period. The second 50-year period was from 1925 to 1975. Alice Bailey primarily, but there were other teachers. There's always overlapping. Leadbeater, Rudolf Steiner. I love Steiner, Leadbeater. So that was part of it. And then the third outpouring, which began in 1975, along with a mixture of quantum physicists who have added to it. In fact, I remember one time Baker saying that if you took theosophy, I'm a neo-theosophist. Certainly the ashram in England was a group of neo-theosophists, as Leadbeater had identified himself as a neo-theosophist. But the idea is that if you carried theosophy to its ultimate conclusion, at least as far as I can think, it would be quantum physics. Because in quantum physics, what they're really identifying and don't know yet, these scientists that I read to you about, the electro, whatever they're called, scientists, said that what quantum physics does, and they don't even know it, but every theosophist should know it and understand it, is that when you talk about the astral body of the earth, or the etheric body of the earth, or the mental body of the earth, or Atma, Buddhi, and Manas, or prana itself, you're talking about the invisible worlds. And it's the quantum physics is dealing with the reality of the invisible worlds, which we call etheric, astral, mental, and higher planes. And they're discovering it, but they don't know what it is. And they're trying to identify it. I told we had a group of astrophysicists and astronomy teachers from the University of Michigan at General Motors when I was there. And they gave the latest at that time photographs and images from space. And after the meeting was over, I went up to a couple of these guys and asked them if they had ever read The Secret Doctrine, primarily volume 1, Cosmogenesis. And I told them I thought it would be a good idea if they would read that, and if they would also read the writings of people like Bailey and Baker, my teacher, and take an interest in quantum physics from the standpoint of the great mystics and occultists of the 20th century. And of course, it didn't go over well. They didn't know what I was talking about. And but someday that will happen. That will definitely happen. And that's something that we can look forward to in generations ahead of us, where science and theology, or science and the esoteric occult, are merged, and it's beginning to happen. We're seeing it. And I think that's one of the things when the externalization of the spiritual teachers takes place around 2025. Don't expect instantaneous change, but it will be the beginning of what they themselves have identified as a new renaissance. That's only a little more than 3 years away. So we'll all live to see that and can appreciate it, because it's going to be an astounding time by virtue of the fact that new ray energies, ray 3, 4, and 7, the rays of active intelligence, art and harmony through conflict, fourth ray, active intelligence being the third ray, and the seventh ray of ceremonial order and magic, which is already expressing itself through the environmentalists. So these energies will change the world in dramatic ways. And one of the ways that we'll see is that there'll be new art forms, fourth ray, that there'll be a renaissance that will make the renaissance of the 1500s look like child's play. I'm already seeing new art forms, new expressions in dance, music, the invention of new musical instruments, sound used as healing, an instrument of healing, and color, how color will be used, not because the color itself heals, but because the color attracts angelic or Davidic forces. They do the healing. Right here in this room, I've practiced esoteric healing through sound and color, through film somewhere. There are rolls of transparent green and purple film that we put up on the windows, and when the sunlight comes through in the morning, it will cast a beautiful purple or green light that the failing or ill person can sit in that light and attract the Davidic forces that heal the organs or heal the bones and do the actual repair work that is required. So it's worth thinking about. We're living in an exciting time, and we have a lot of ammunition here in this room, just in the artwork of the room, the pictures, the paintings, and in the books especially, where a whole another new outpouring of wisdom teachings resides in the pages of these books. So what time is it now? It's
8:15. So we have actually I wanted to bring attention to timing, right? So 7:30 we have the time change. I don't know if every country has that time change any longer.
a good question.
And also I know some states doesn't have that anymore also. Like Arizona doesn't change the time, so it's like it is challenging maybe some other people.
Yeah,
So I would say that do we want
it's
to
a good thought.
do we want to do 7:30 still, or do we want to do once a month maybe?
Yeah,
So
or at a different time, you mean? Like,
yeah, exactly,
early.
different time earlier maybe.
Yeah, well, we're not going to discuss that now. We'll discuss it when we go upstairs. What we need to do is to give the people on the Zoom meeting an opportunity to ask questions. But what you brought up is good, and we'll discuss it when we're in the upper.
Well, I
regional
just want
range.
them to know
Yeah.
also, because
Yeah.
obviously they watching us,
Right.
so
Yeah.
they
So-
may comment on later on through the
Right. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll decide over the coming next week or 2 or 3 how we're going to handle the time change, and if we want to meet earlier or keep the same time, or what we want to do. It is getting darker earlier, and if you live in Michigan or any place close by, you know that it gets dark at 4:30 in the afternoon in the winter months. So yeah, we'll have to discuss that. What we want to do right now is if there are any questions anybody wants to ask on the Zoom meeting, they can unmute.
Hi, David.
Hi,
It's Christina.
hi, Christina.
The aspect about language, I know that German is a preferred language in many instances for like philosophy, medicine, and because it's so flexible, they have those long words where they put everything together that then becomes a concept. Do you know why, or was there a reason why they chose English over German?
Yeah, because it's more elastic. I have medical dictionaries here, and it's predominantly Latin terms, not German terms. There are
Okay.
Latin and there are English terms. See, the Latin language and French, there's 20,000 French words that are used in the English language. That's what I'm talking about. That the elasticity of the language was that they were able to absorb other languages, Greek, Latin, French. So the English language isn't just a bunch of words made up in England, but there are words from many different languages and civilizations that create the sum total of the English language. And
I understand what you mean now.
the ultimate reason, Christina, behind it was that when John Richardson was writing the plays, he knew that those plays would be popular all over the world. And he knew that also what was coming, and he was going to be a part of it 500 years into the future, because that's the way those guys work. When I say those guys, I'm talking about the spiritual hierarchy of the planet. They're working for hundreds of years into the future. And so he knew, Richardson knew, that the authoring of a new astrology, which will change the world for all time. It will change the world by virtue of the fact that the new astrology, along with the new psychology, which will be an exact science, which is ray psychology, will open the doorway and the gates to the Aquarian age, which will open the gates to the age of Capricorn, which is the age of initiation. That's when millions of souls become fifth degree initiates, and they take that great initiation in the age of Capricorn and higher. So that's what they're working for, and that's what that language was about.
Thank you.
Hope that answered.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, anybody
Hi.
else?
Can you hear me?
What?
This is Jean Ross.
Who is it?
Jean Ross.
Yeah, Jean, yeah. How you
Okay.
doing?
In 1980, I happened to be in London, and I went to a meeting that was run by Benjamin Creme. Now, he was the one who
I met
always
Ben
talked-
Creme many times. Yeah.
Right. He was always talking about the reappearance of Christ.
Maitreya.
Many years since then. So I'm wondering, is he still around? If he's not, whatever happened?
No, he died. No, he died. I forget. He died a few years back. He was a nice guy, but he was just wrong about so much of that stuff. He has followers in obscure places like New Zealand, you know, people follow him in Australia. But I remember one of his representatives one time, I went to a huge event in Chicago. It was at the Ramada O'Hare Hotel in August of 1982. And Ben Creme couldn't make it, so he sent his representative. I wish I could tell the whole story, but I can't, because we don't have time.
Yeah, he
But,
always used all the Alice Bailey mantras and
Yeah. He was all caught up in all of that. And just so much of what he said was inaccurate.
Yeah,
And
I agree with that.
I remember the first time I saw him, and he went into this dazed trance state, like he was being overshadowed or something. He might have been, but the information that he gave out was it wasn't of a high quality. I'll say that.
Right.
And what is it leading to? You know, my belief is, and people will call me crazy and attack me, is that he's already been here. He did his work. He is now expressing himself through 1,000 disciples in the world. It will lead to the externalization in just a few years of the spiritual hierarchy of our planet. Maybe all of them, maybe not all of them, but a large number. And there are already initiates in the world, 4th degree, 5th degree. I've met quite a few in my life, which give me hope that there is a bright spiritual future. We're in a dark time right now by virtue of the fact that we're stuck in the transitional period between the death of the Piscean age and the birthing of the age of Aquarius. One of the things that Baker used to say was that the early part, first 100 or so years of the Aquarian age, 200 years, will be filled with chaos. And I can already see it. So
Okay,
it'll
thank
be
you.
filled with chaos because there'll be guys like Ben Krim that will come around and will add to it. Well-intentioned, but completely, I don't know, off track. He was a nice guy. And I spoke to him, but I remember his representative telling a huge group of people at the Ramada O'Hare Hotel in August of 1982 that yes, the Christ was coming and that he would be in an androgynous body. I had one of the most mystical experiences of my life. I've had quite a few in my life, but I had one just hours before this guy spoke. And I had met a being who was an experiment by the spiritual hierarchy of the planet. And they were using his throat chakra. And they would line up behind him as they did with Leadbeater to look through his microscopic cone third eye that he had developed over 2,000 years of being out of incarnation, so he could write and draw the images of the what he called occult chemistry and the periodic table, the images of the elements of the periodic table. But they would use this friend, this man I had met, very mysterious character, who, when he spoke, I can remember being in rooms with hundreds of people, and the people would just be sobbing uncontrollably. And I asked him, why is that happens? And he said, because the words that he was speaking, they weren't his words, but they were words of these beings, these overshadowing, which is prophesied, it's going to happen. It is happening. That the words were, in his terms, supercharged with cosmic energy. It's a lot to think about. But I witnessed it, and it's real. And I would put him way above Ben Krim any day of the week. I never saw that kind of reaction from hundreds of people in a room with Ben Krim, but I saw it with this person. His name was Dr. Joseph Busby, extraordinary human being, told me stories that the Count Saint Germain had taken him back into some of his previous lives. And he would tell me stories about these previous lives of Saint Germain that were just the most amazing, beautiful, and incredible stories. And a lot of the masters, it wasn't just Saint Germain, but DK and others were using him. It was an interesting time in my life.
Thanks. You've had so many wonderful experiences.
I'm a lucky guy. Anybody else? Randy's got a question right here, Randy.
You mentioned healing colors of
Hmm.
green and blue. Have you ever
Purple.
heard of orange?
Yeah.
Orange as having any significance?
Yeah, I don't know
Human
what
life?
it is, but they all do. Red, yellow. Leadbeater said in his writings, Randy, that in the future there would be temples
Mhm.
that would be all one color, red, like a red temple. And you'd go into this red temple and there'd be red glass and the walls would be red and everything would be red, and they would attract the Davic forces that were attracted to the color red that would do the healing of specific things, whether it was the blood,
Okay.
whether it was the bones, whether it was the muscles. That's what the green and the purple do. And I've experimented with it here in my home. And there's a lot to it. It's a lot to consider. It's
Mhm.
not just the color, but it's what the colors attract to it. And I remember Leadbeater talking about a yellow and a red healing temples. And it'll be a part of healing in the future.
Mm.
Yeah, Ron.
This strange cigar-shaped object
Yeah,
circling
right,
that's supposedly interplanetary.
right.
Do you believe there's an intelligence behind it?
Yes, yeah. Yeah, I do. Absolutely. Yeah. It may or may not embody the actual object, but it is the force behind it, an intelligence behind it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the rays. It has, it's like I said in the writings of Steiner and Bailey, they talk about these objects that come in extra systemic, and they affect the energy and the potency of the rays. And some rays are dying, and some rays are being energized and coming in after being out for a long time. The fourth ray that's coming in, they say will last, I think it's about 800 years, but it'll bring a new renaissance to the world that will make the renaissance of the 1500s look like child's play. And there's all kinds of reasons for that. They'll be able to have new metals and new ways of travel, new means of travel. We talked before here, I've got a PowerPoint on it in a lecture that I gave. In the PowerPoint, there's what we call the space elevator. NASA is working on a space elevator where they'll be able to take cargo to the moon. And this space elevator is a cable that is made out of diamonds and something else stronger than anything we can imagine. And it moves in synchronous motion with the Earth. And they'll take it to the moon. And the moon will eventually be colonized. And as we colonize the moon, we will help reconstruct the astral body of the moon, which was destroyed billions of years ago. And human beings already, because of the expansion, you've heard me say this many times, but people on our Zoom meeting probably have not heard it, is that the astral body of the Earth is expanding because the population is expanding. And as the population expands, we produce an effluent We react emotionally. We scream and yell at football games and baseball games and all kinds of sporting events. And that energy goes out into space. That's astral energy. Astral is emotional. And so it's causing the body, the astral body of the earth to expand, and it's now touching the moon. And it's affecting the things like volcanoes and earthquakes and tsunamis are being affected by the gravitational pull of the moon on the earth at this time. It's worth thinking about. Very interesting. Yeah, Wes.
You mentioned loss of blue flowers.
Yeah.
What effect is that going to have on this? What's that going to affect?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know that it's going to affect very much, but it's proof that the fourth ray is coming in. And that was why Bailey gave it out. It's kind of a lesser thing, but it might also be, if it's destroying blue flowers, is it creating some other kinds of flowers of another color that maybe we've never seen before? And they talk about that in the esoteric writings, that as the Earth and the solar system evolve, because we're all evolving, that we'll be able to, we'll see new colors that we've never seen before.
It's time's up. 8:33 now. It's past. So
Okay. All right, folks, I guess time is up tonight. So I want to thank everybody, and we'll meet again next week.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, David.
All right, thank you.
You showed up.